In this demo, we're going to follow up on the value scale and do a little blending exercise, create a simple value scale just for the purpose of showing you a technique for blending. And then we'll do a Grisaille study of the pair. Grisaille, as you know, is a painting executed in grays. You can use black. I'm using black. I've mixed 2 intermediate grays, and then I have a white towards the bottom of the palette paper, which you might not be able to see in the video. So 4 values, basically. And this can be done in oils. And again, oils will make things a lot easier when it comes time to blending and giving form to objects. If you're using acrylics, and I know about half the class is using acrylics, you can use the retarder medium, and all you need to do is mix a little bit of a drop or two of retarder medium into your colors and your paints. You can also keep the paint moist. If you have a spray bottle, you can just spray a little bit of water on the paints as you're working, or cover it in plastic wrap if you have that. The trick is to try and keep the acrylic paints on the palette workable. They will dry, and once they do dry, they're just like plastic. You'll just have to remix and start over at that point. All right, so the first thing we'll do, grab a brush. Any brush will do. I'm using a round bristle brush, number 4, round. And I'll begin by filling in this square with white, which again, you might not even be able to see that either. But what I'm going to do here is similar to the value scale. And if you wanted to do something with even more values mixed, 7 or 9 values, you could do this. In between each value and later on in between each color, try to clean your brush. What I'm doing here is similar to a value scale, but I'm going to blend in between each of these values to try and create a smooth gradation from white to black. And that's the idea here. Clean up a little bit. You can see the different value there, difference in value. You don't need a ton of paint to be able to do this. And then finally we'll add the black. I'm going to use these same values that I mixed up and the white and the black to work on the pair once I finish this. And we'll try to make this fast. You don't have to work fast. As a matter of fact, the slower you go, the faster you'll get done. Kind of a paradox, but it's true just about anything in life. The slower you go, the faster you'll get done, because the chances are you won't have to go back and redo things and correct mistakes and things like that. Okay, so cleaning the brush very carefully. I have mineral spirits and linseed oil. The linseed oil I might use when I'm painting, just to help the paint flow a bit. But if I use it, I won't use that much. And when I blend, I use a kind of a hatching motion like this. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And anytime, well, basically what you're doing is trying to, well, you're bringing one value into the other. But anytime that you want to move in the opposite direction, in a particular direction, you should clean off your brush, and I'll show you why. Right now I'm moving from left to right, bringing some of the white into that lighter gray. If I decide to go back, then I bring that gray into the white area, and I kind of mess things up. So I would have to go back and start again and try to blend that in, and so on and so forth. So smoother the brush, the better. This one is a little bit rough, but we're beginning to get our our gradations, blending little by little. Doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, some folks will shoot for a photographic kind of effect where the brushwork is barely discernible and the gradations are super smooth. It's up to you. Everything's a matter of style and preference. So as long as you get the idea across, and the whole idea is giving form to objects, roundness, a sense of volume. All right, so now we'll move into the next section, the next round, and these are grays that are not quite as distinct in value as the white and the second gray, so the blending might be a little bit easier there. Now, regardless of whether you're working on a figure, a still life, if you are looking to blend a couple of colors or values together, it helps to pre-mix the different tonalities and put them down in different sections and then begin the blending process. That's very helpful. And then the dark gray and the black. And I'm just going back and forth with a kind of hatching motion, bringing the dark, the black actually, towards the left, and vice versa. All right. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I want to keep this kind of short. So I think we'll stop there. Okay, so that's the idea. Blending. This value scale so that the gradations from one to the other are smooth. There's always something to fix in a painting, or even an exercise. Okay? We'll leave it at that. Maybe. All right, so let's move on to the pear. And I'm going to change brushes and stick with this one. I'm right-handed, so I like to work from left to right. Sometimes people will work from dark to light, but I'm going to start on the left-hand side of the pear and move my way towards the right where the shadow area is. And some folks like to start with the background and then the object. I start with the object and then I fill in the background, and eventually you're going to be going back and forth as far as making some changes. And once you have these values mixed up, in between these, you can mix anything you want, another intermediate value. If the paint is thick, a little bit of linseed oil will get it to flow. Sometimes you don't really need to use it much at all. And just begin blocking in midtones. Assessing the values and filling in general areas of light and dark, and then you can begin the blending process and adjusting values and that kind of thing. I'm working on a tabletop, not an easel. I don't have a standard easel in my studio. I have an easel that I custom built that's attached to the wall. And this is less than ideal because working on a flat surface, if you're working large, you may end up with certain distortions in terms of perspective and scale. And I'm getting a little bit of glare from the light, so I don't recommend it, but if this is the kind of setup you need to use, then do what you have to do. This pear has a lot of Well, it's not real for one thing, but it has a lot of patterns on it, those little dark spots and things like that. So it's dark in that area, but it's a combination of shadow and just the patterns, the general patterns. Now these things, the general values that you see can be blocked in. And eventually when the paint dries, if you wanted to begin a kind of a pointillist approach for a subject like this, to add all those little dots or just to suggest some of them, and it works better, it's easier to achieve when the painting has dried a bit or has dried completely, and then you take a fine round brush and begin to paint on top of that so that the paint doesn't begin to blend. Some reflected light down there, try to capture that. We might have to go back in there. And we fine tune our contours and edges, and I haven't used the black yet, but I will eventually. Maybe a little bit now. So fine-tuning the edges and contours, but that can also be, if something doesn't look quite right to you, don't worry about it, because once you begin the process of filling in the background, you can also use that to clean edges and things like that. So I'm going to try and get the paint off the brush and begin blending a bit. Bringing some of the darker values into the lighter area and vice versa. Eventually I'll probably punch up the highlight area. And I can also use a kind of, this actually kind of a stippling, but using the side of the brush to capture some of the, it helps to blend, but also capture some of the texture. Begin to give it some form. Grab some more white. And we'll probably just leave that at some point and move on. Lock in a little bit of the background and the cast shadow and things like that. Don't spend too much time on this. You get the idea. Okay. And at this point, I think I'm going to move on to the cast shadow. The first thing, actually, I think if I can get a really small brush and just take care of that stem. Actually, I probably need that in the end. And cast shadow underneath. That's going to be tricky, but it's really dark. Darkest cast shadow, darkest part of the cast shadow directly underneath the object. And then it begins to lighten up as it moves away from the object. Shadows begin to lighten up again. Remember the basic concepts. Ambient light starts to fill in. The shadow edge becomes less sharp. And as long as the paint remains workable, we can also work with that during while we're filling in the background. Nice and loose, and I might switch to a slightly bigger brush and just block in some basic values and give the piece a little bit of atmosphere, suggest a space around it. Now, one trick that artists do often in order to really make the shadows pop and to create a sense of drama, you can exaggerate what you see in the background. If I have just a blank backdrop, off-white backdrop, I could try and match those values. But what we have here is a light side on the left side and a dark side on the right side. And what we can do, and what artists often do in order to really make things pop a bit, is just they darken the space, the negative space that's adjacent to the light side. Darken it up a bit. And do the opposite on the right hand side, on the shadow side, use a lighter value. And again, I'll try to do this quickly. May not be as neat as I would like it to be, but that's okay. Quick demo. And begin to lighten up a bit as we make our way across. Now, all of this stuff is wet, so I want to be careful. The stem that I just painted. It's still wet, so as I work my way around, I'm going to be really careful with that. But of course you can go back into this when it dries. And I'll probably need some more white. But right now I'm going to begin to lighten the value as I make my way across to the other side, so that the lighter value background area is up against the darker side, the shadow side of the pear. So the effect together will make things pop a bit. Linseed oil, paint, edge, fix the edge as we make our way down. Any loose brush marks, or even if you want to just correct the profile of the edge, you can do that now. So this is the idea. And we're almost done here as far as this demo. All right, we'll leave it at that. Okay, and of course the foreground needs to be blocked in. So in your Grisaille painting, this is a Grisaille painting of a pear, study, values, and this could be, I could work on it more. Of course I have to do the foreground, let it dry and render it a little more. This could be as polished and as finished as you would like it to be. But anyway, this is a Grisaille painting. So a value scale showing a simultaneous contrast, a value scale blended, 4 values blended together as smoothly as possible, and a study of one or several studies of single objects before we jump into our full-fledged Grisaille painting in the next session. That's it.